Hi, welcome to the channel OutSystems Code with Mayank. I have this channel to share the OutSystems video with you. My name is Mayank and I'm so thrilled to have you join this channel. Before we jump into the OutSystems stuff, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you. Thank you for being a part of this incredible journey. Today I'm going to talk about multi-tenancy in OutSystems. Let's understand what is multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is a software architecture in which a single instance of a software application serves multiple customer or tenants. Each tenant's data and configuration are isolated from each other, providing a sense of customization and privacy for each user or customer. Let's understand this with the help of an example. Let's suppose we are implementing one e-commerce site. And for this e-commerce site, we have a various customers like we have Amazon, we have Flipkart, we have Meesho. And we wanted to implement this e-commerce site for all these three customers. So the traditional approach is that for Amazon, we can implement a separate application with a separate database. Similarly, for Flipkart, we can implement the separate application with a separate database. And if the customers increases, we can implement a separate application for that customer, and this goes on. This is one approach. Another approach is that what we can do, we can implement a single application. We can implement a single application that serves our multiple customers, whether it's Amazon, Flipkart, or Meesho. With the help of single instance, you can serve the multiple customers. This particular approach is called multi-tenancy. And here this application behave in such a way, whatever data you are sharing for a particular customer, that is isolated from another customer data. This configuration can do. That's why this is really useful concept. So now we understood what is multi-tenancy. Let's move ahead and understand why multi-tenancy. There are various advantages we will get if we implement a multi-tenancy. The first advantage is cost efficiency. So multi-tenancy allows for the efficient use of resources. As a single instance of the application can serve multiple tenants, this can result in cost saving in terms of infrastructure and maintenance. Very useful. Scalability. It simplifies scaling since resources can be allotted dynamically based on varying needs of different tenants. Tenants is nothing but the customer only. Isolation. Tenants are logically separated or isolated from each other, ensuring data privacy and security. This is crucial in scenarios where different tenants may be competitors or have strict regulatory requirements. Customization. Each tenant can have its own configuration settings, branding, and customizations while still using the same underlying application. So all these kind of things we can do. And that's why it is very important to utilize a multi-tenancy if you have a requirement, similar kind of requirement for multiple customers or vendors. Okay. Now the next thing is we understood what is multi-tenancy, why multi-tenancy. Now the next thing is how we can implement a multi-tenancy. Why? How part is very much important. So in OutSystems, if you want to create a multi-tenant application, every e-space of the application has to be marked as multi-tenant. So it means every e-space has a property called is multi-tenant. If you set this property as a yes, okay. So if you set this property as a yes, it means you are willing to create that e-space as a multi-tenant. Okay, this is the foremost requirement of creating the multi-tenant application. Now, practically we will see how we can create the tenants, how we can create the users specific to the tenant, and how we can customize the login flow to log in a specific tenant. Okay, so all these things I wanted to show you practically how we can do this in OutSystems. So let me move to the Service Studio and let me do all these things practically. So to implement this demo, I created one application, reactive web application. The name of this application is multi-tenancy demo, and with the reactive app module, multi-tenancy demo. Now I have some ready-made code available for this application just to demonstrate you guys. Not much, little bit code I have implemented. So first thing what I have implemented here is I have a one table called as product. In this particular entity, I have a few attributes. I have a name, description, quantity, price, and is active. Apart from this, for this product entity, I have a product listing and product detail page. Simple operations, simple CRUD operations I can perform on this entity with the help of these two pages. Product page will list out all the entities record, and the product detail page allow me to create a new product in my entity. Apart from this, if you go to the logic tab, I implemented one or two roles basically, tenant user and tenant admin. The purpose of creating these two roles is that with the help of tenant admin, I can manage the tenant. So this is going to be an admin of my tenant that can perform the tenant related operation. Like this particular roles user can create the tenant in my application, as well as they can create the users specific to that tenant. Apart from this, I have another role, tenant user. This is simple as a user role that allows to navigate in my application. He can create the product, he can see the product listing, so all the product related stuff he can perform in my application. So this is the purpose of creating these two roles. Now, apart from this, I just want to talk about multi-tenancy now. So as I mentioned, if at all, if you want to implement any space as a multi-tenant, the first thing you have to do, you have to set the is multi-tenant property. Is multi-tenant property to yes. Okay, so this is what you have to do. So what you have to set? You have to set this is multi-tenant property as a yes. Once you set this property as a yes, from here onwards, your e-space behave as a multi-tenant e-space. Now what changes it will apply? The first change, it will apply to all the entities of your e-space. Now all the e-space entity will refer to your parent entity called as tenant entity. Okay, so let me add that dependency here quickly. So there is a one tenant entity that resides under the system e-space. Okay, so let me show you this entity. Okay, so here we go. We have this tenant entity. So let me add this tenant entity. So this tenant entity is the parent entity, and the ID of this tenant entity is referred in each and every entity, okay, as a foreign key. Okay, this is one thing. Another thing is that if you go to the advanced property of your entity, and here you can see every entity also has is multi-tenant property. The default value is empty, which is nothing but it will inherit the value from the module is multi-tenant property. Okay, if there you have set the is multi-tenant property as a yes, it means default all the entities will behave as a multi-tenant. Apart from this, explicitly if you want to set the property as a no, you can set the no as well, and definitely you can set the yes as well. Now below this you have a one more property called as show tenant identifier. If you select this property as a yes, from here onwards, it will start displaying the tenant ID reference attribute. As I mentioned, tenant is going to be a parent entity for all the entities of your e-space. Now, you are willing to show this this reference identifier attribute. Now, if you set this as a yes, it means from here onwards, you have to manage the value of this tenant entity by yourself. If you are creating a new record, you have to set the value as a tenant ID here. Okay, so you have to pass this tenant ID value. If you uncheck this one, it means OutSystems will automatically manage the tenant ID value. You don't need to do anything with respect to that. Whatever current tenant is running, that value OutSystem will pass. And how we can identify which tenant is running? For that purpose, OutSystem has provided us two properties, tenant ID and the tenant name. So here you can see these are the side properties. These side properties return you the current running tenant ID and the tenant name. For the demonstration purpose, what I did here is in the product page, I created one container, and inside the container, I have printed out this site property value. Okay, so in the data action, I'm fetching those two values, site properties values, and I'm displaying directly. So that I want to demonstrate to you what is the current tenant. So by default, guys, by default, every application has a user module as a default tenant. So what it is going to do, it is going to display the user module name and the user module tenant ID in the container. As of now, we have not implemented anything specific to the tenant. This is the default thing that I'm showing you right now. Okay, so let me log in with the user that is this particular user is my admin user. And here we go. So I don't have any records related to the products. That's why this table is empty. And here you can check it out. So it is showing me the current tenant information that I'm retrieving from the site properties. For this particular module, the default tenant is user tenant, user module tenant. Okay, that's why it is displaying the user module tenant name and its tenant ID 90. Okay. Now the next thing is what I wanted to do. I wanted to show you how we can create the tenant. Okay, so we will perform the tenant management. In this tenant management, we will perform the two operations. We will create the tenant as well as we will create the users specific to the tenant. But these two operations, who can perform? These two operations can tenant, only the tenant admin users role can perform. Okay, so it means tenant admin can manage the tenant in my application. This is what I wanted to implement. So let's implement this thing. So what I'm doing, I'm just going inside I'm creating one more UI flow. I'm calling it as an admin UI flow. Okay, admin flow. So all the stuff related to the admin, I will keep here. First thing, what I wanted to implement, I wanted to implement a page for showing all the tenants that I have in my eSpace or in my environment, as well as I wanted to provide the facility to create the tenant. Now we already have this tenant entity. Okay, so let me utilize few of the uh, quick things. So quickly, I wanted to implement this listing and the detail page. So let me drag and drop this entity in the UI flow. When you drag and drop the entity inside the UI flow, it will automatically create the listing and the detail page for you. And from here onwards, we will update this page. Okay. So tenants and the tenant detail page is automatically created by the platform for me. So let's modify. Let's start modifying these things. So I'm coming here inside the tenant page, and here it is displaying all the tenants. So how it is retrieving? It is retrieving that information from the tenant table. Okay. So it applies the join with the eSpace name so that it can display me the eSpace ID as well. Okay. So all that kind of joins you can perform, because inside the tenant table, you have a one foreign key as a eSpace ID. So if at all, if you want to display, you can display. So see, it will display these kind of things. Now, what we wanted to do. Next thing, I wanted to provide the facility to create the tenant. So for that purpose, we have a tenant detail page. Okay. Okay. We have a tenant detail page. Now here we have a tenant and the eSpace ID. Since eSpace ID is a foreign key, that's why it created as a dropdown. I don't want this one. Okay. I wanted to create all the tenant with respect to user module. So for that purpose, I'm deleting this one. Obviously, the scope is active flag is going to be a true only. So let me delete this one as well. So I have a one attribute only, tenant name. So let me delete this tenant ID, name, eSpace ID, and is active. Okay. Or maybe I can delete this one as well and this attribute as well. I don't want to provide the facility to update the tenant name as of now. I just wanted to provide the facility to create the tenant. So for that purpose, let me create one local variable and I'm calling it as a tenant name. Okay. And let me bind this with the tenant name local variable simply. I don't want to provide the facility to update, so let me delete this code as well. So let me just put this here and let me delete this as well. Okay, this is very simple. I want to keep it very simple. Apart from this, I'm just going to the tenants, and from here I wanted to remove the hyperlink as well. Okay, so I'm just right clicking and I'm saying remove link. These are the few changes that we did here. Simple. Okay, so here we need to write our code. So let's write that code. Okay, now I wanted to provide the facility to display the to create the tenant. So for that purpose, I have a tenant detail page. Now, if you want to create the tenant in OutSystems provide you one default server action. Let me show you that. Under the system namespace, we have a one server action called as tenant create. So let me show you tenant create. What this particular server action will do, it will accept the e-space name and the tenant name as an input parameter. It will create the tenant and return you the created tenant ID to you. So let me add this. Along with this, I wanted to utilize one more server action called as a tenant switch that allows us to switch the tenant. Later on, we will utilize this one. So for that purpose, I'm utilizing this. And I'm clicking on this apply button. Okay. Now, when we hit the save button, we have this server action. Instead of calling the entity action, let me change the code here. What server action we want to utilize? From the system namespace, we want to utilize the tenant create. Okay, and this tenant create has two input parameters, e-space name and the tenant name. This tenant name value is provided by the end user. So let's accept that value as an input parameter. So let me delete this one, device input parameter, and let me add input parameter and let me call it as a tenant name. The same input parameter value I'm passing to this function, tenant name. Now the next thing is we need to provide, whenever we will create the tenant, we need to specify this tenant is associated with which e-space. That e-space name we have to provide here. Okay. So here we need to provide the user module e-space name. I can directly provide that value here like this one, user. But the problem arises when you start or when you change your user provider module. Okay, so if you change your user provider module, this hard-coded value will not make sense for you. Okay, let's find out. Let's check it out how we can retrieve this user e-space name. For this purpose, let me pick this e-space. Okay, so what this entity will do? This entity will return you all the e-space of your environment. But basically, I wanted to find out the e-space user, right? So let's see how we can find out. For this purpose, let me add one more difference of the server action. Let me show you one more thing. If you go to the user space, see there is one more server action called as get effective user provider e-space ID. Let me quickly utilize it. What this function will do, this function will return you the effective user provider e-space ID. Okay, so let me add this one. And let me filter out the record based on this user space ID. So I'm saying where e-space ID is equal to user function get effective user space EID. Okay, so it will return me only a single record based on my user provider e-space ID and that name I wanted to pass. So it is going to return me the single record. So I'm passing the max record value as a 1. And whatever e-space name it is going to return, that I'm passing to the input parameter of e-space name of tenant create. It means I will be able to create the tenant. Now, once the tenant is created, it's a good practice to pass the newly created ID as well. Okay, so this function is going to return me the ID so that I am passing. Okay, now I'm going back to my save or detail function, and here let me pass this input parameter value tenant name. Okay, and let me delete this one old parameter. Now, once the tenant is created, I wanted to redirect the user to the tenant page. So let me drag and drop this one. Okay, so it will take me. Along with this, let's suppose I want to display the message. So maybe I'm printing tenant created success. Okay, I wanted to print this message, tenant created successfully. And here inside the tenant, I wanted to filter out the record as well. I don't want to display all the tenants of the environment. I only want to display the tenants where the eSpace is user provider module. Okay. So here also we can perform that check. Okay. So here I'm coming inside my get tenants aggregate and I'm saying where the tenant eSpace ID is equal to get effective user provider eSpace ID. So what this will do, this will return all the tenants where the eSpace ID is equal to user provider module eSpace ID. Okay. And as I mentioned, these two pages should be accessible only to the tenant admin role. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm just making here. So this page is only accessible to tenant admin. Okay. And let me hit this one click publish button. So meantime it is publishing, let me summarize what we have implemented. We implemented the functionality to create the tenant. So for that purpose, we have a tenant entity. And based on this tenant entity, we have two pages, tenants and a tenant detail page. This page lists out all the tenants and this page allows us to create the new tenant. So let me open this particular application in browser and let me show you. So let me log in with my admin user who has all the roles of the environment. See, current tenant is 19 and the tenant name is users. Now I'm saying I want to create a new tenant. So I'm switching myself to the tenant page. And right now it is showing me only one tenant, user provider tenant, which has a eSpace as a user. Let me click on add tenant and let me create Amazon tenant. Tenant created successfully. So this tenant is created and see this Amazon tenant is created with respect to the eSpace user. Now let me create another tenant. I'm calling it as a Flipkart. Flipkart is another tenant that I'm creating here. Okay. So now I have a two tenants, Amazon and Flipkart. Now the next thing what we wanted to do, tenant creation is done. We are done with creating the tenant. Now the next thing what we wanted to do, we wanted to create the users with respect to the tenant so that we can have the separate user base for Amazon tenant and separate user base for Flipkart tenant. Okay. So whenever the Amazon tenant users will log in, they can see their products only. And similarly, if the Flipkart's tenant user will log in, they can see only the Flipkart's tenant data. Okay. So let's see how we can implement the users with respect to the tenant. So for this one also, let me quickly go to the UI flow and let me drag and drop the user entity. Okay. But before dragging and dropping this user entity inside the admin flow, I wanted to specify the tenant as well, because if we are not going to show the tenant ID, it means automatically OutSystem will manage and whatever default tenant we have, it will insert that value inside the tenant ID. Okay. So for the user table, explicitly, I want to manage the tenant ID. It means I wanted to create the user specific to a tenant. Okay. So for that purpose, what we have to do, we have to show the tenant ID value. Okay. Tenant ID attribute. So what we have to do that, I'm just going to the advanced property and I'm saying show tenant identifier. From now here onwards, whenever I will create the tenant or create the user, while creating the user, I need to pass the tenant ID value for that user. Okay. So now what I'm doing, I'm just going to the admin UI flow and let me drag and drop this user entity. Okay. Again, what this will do, this will create the user. Okay. This will create the user listing page and the user detail page. And from there, we will modify those pages. Why I'm doing this thing? Just to speed up our process. Okay, so let me come back here inside the users. Okay, so what it is doing, it is displaying all the users and the tenant information as well. So here we have a couple of attributes. So we have a tenant name. This user belongs to which tenant? So that information we are showing, and we are showing all the users information. Okay. One more thing we can do here is we can only display the users with respect to the tenant, where with respect to the tenant of eSpace user provider. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm just applying one more filter here is I'm saying just pick all the tenants user where the eSpace ID is equal to get effective user provider eSpace ID. Okay. So it will narrow down our filter users list. Okay. Now the next thing is what we wanted to do. We wanted to create a new user. Okay. So for that purpose, we have a user detail page. So it is showing us the drop down for selecting the tenant, name, username, email. And when you drag and drop a user entity, OutSystems will not create the container for the password field. So let me quickly do that thing. Okay. So let me create one more container for the password. Okay. So let's modify maybe an external as a password. I'm calling it as a password because we want to allow the login process as well for the user so that we can verify our data as well. Okay. So now this is associated with password. And let me rename it. Okay. Type is password, mobile phone password, and let me quickly reshuffle this container to after email. Mobile number, we don't want to provide the creation date facility. This is default. Mobile number as well, password, last login is active. Okay, default, whenever we will create a new user, it is going to be an active state only. Okay, now save button, and this particular server action is created by the OutSystems. Here, see, we are providing the facility to create the user, create or update the user. Okay, and here we are returning, but along with creating a user, I wanted to provide one more facility. What I wanted to do, whenever we are creating a user, with respect to this role, for the newly user, the whatever user we are creating for the tenant, we wanted to provide the role as a tenant user. Okay. So what we can utilize? We can utilize here is grant tenant user role. But the problem with this grant tenant user role is that what it will do, it will create this user, it will assign the role to this user with respect to the tenant that we are on default. And right now, this application is running on the default tenant 90, which is nothing but the user. But what we wanted to do, we wanted to assign the role for the specific tenant. Like if we are creating the user for Amazon tenant, we wanted to assign the role for Amazon tenant only. Okay. So how we can implement that? So to implement this, let's take the reference of the table. Okay. So for this purpose, under the system dependency, let me pick few tables, a roles table basically. Okay. So if at all, if you want to create a role, what you have to do, you have to do the entry in the user role table. And this user role table has a two parameters only, a user ID and the password ID. Okay, this you have to pass. And if you are doing the entry here, you have to do the entry for the tenant ID as well. And because this user role is specific to a tenant, right? So for that purpose, what you have to do, we have to do one more thing. We have to show the tenant identifier for this table as well. It means now for this user role table, whenever we are assigning the role to a particular user, we have to specify the tenant ID as well. It means in that particular tenant, this user has this role. Okay, that's why I'm utilizing this entity. I'm not utilizing this default uh, role action. Why? Because it is not going to ask me for which tenant you want to assign. Automatically, it will pick the default one. Okay, but explicitly I'm creating the user for the tenant, and for that user, for that tenant, I wanted to assign the role. So that's why I'm utilizing this user role entity. Okay. So once the user is created, what I have to do? I have to do the entry in this table, user role table. So I'm utilizing create or update user role, and here I need to pass few things. Okay. I need to pass tenant ID. So tenant ID definitely I'm getting as a source tenant ID. And the ID, if I have the ID, I will pass that. Otherwise, I won't pass. Okay. And I have the user ID and the role ID. Okay. But here, just for the simplicity purpose, what we wanted to do, we just wanted to provide the facility to assign the role, create the role. Okay. So instead of utilizing create or update, let's utilize this create user role. Okay. And let's parse three values. Tenant ID, this is the source value. User ID, this user ID is the one that we have created or updated. And the role ID, what role you want to assign. So what role I wanted to assign for this newly created user? Tenant user. So that value I'm passing. And once the user is successfully created, okay, what I wanted to do, I wanted to redirect user back to my user page. Okay, this is what is happening along with the message user created successfully. Okay, okay, so let's make the correct role selection for this entity, tenant admin. Okay, so these two pages are only accessible to the admin page because this comes under the admin flow only. Okay, so only admin can create the users and create the tenant. Let's verify quickly. So here what we are doing, we are creating the users, and we are listing out the users, and here in this particular screen we are creating the users. Okay, and quickly what I want to do, let me hit this one click publish button. Okay, so far what we did, guys, we provided the facility to create the users with respect to the tenant. Okay, and here also we can do one change. Inside this grid tenant, instead of finding out all the tenants, we can only find it out the tenants where the eSpace ID is equal to that effective user provider ID. So it won't display all the tenants of the environment, only the user provider associate tenants. Okay, so that we can easily find it out. Okay. So meanwhile, it is publishing. Let me show you one more time what we have implemented. So we have created the user creation facility. Okay, let me refresh this page. I already logged in as a admin who has a capability to create the tenant as well as create the users. Now in the tenant page, it is listing out three tenants: users, Amazon, and Flipkart. I'm switching to the users, and see, it's showing me all the users that is coming from the user tenant. Right now, we don't have any users specific to the Amazon and Flipkart tenant that we previously created. So let's create the users with respect to those tenants. So I'm picking up Amazon, and I'm saying user1@amazon.com. So this particular user belongs to Amazon tenant. Okay. So something like this one. So just to uniquely identify this user, I have created this user with the name Amazon.com so that I can easily identify this user belongs to Amazon tenant. Okay. So since we have created the password as well, and in OutSystems, whenever we save the password in the users table, always we have to encrypt that password. If you are not encrypt, OutSystem is going to throw an exception for that. Let's quickly do that as well. So before saving a password, let's encrypt that password. Okay. Okay. So how we can encrypt the password? To encrypt the password, we have to utilize one more server action. So let's quickly utilize that one. Okay. So that also comes from user dependency, encrypt password. And what it will do, it will accept the username and it will accept the plain password and it will return you the encrypted password. And in user table, we have to save the encrypted password only. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just saying assign, and in the source.password, let me assign the value from the encrypted password. So I'm passing the username, whatever I have, and I'm passing the plain text password as well. And what this is going to do, this is going to return me the encrypted password that I'm setting back to my password field and that we are passing here for creating an user. And let me publish one more time. Okay. So meantime it is publishing, let me summarize what we did here. We encrypted the password. Why we have encrypted? Because in the user table, we have to save the encrypted password only. Okay, then only it will allow the smooth login. So let me refresh this one more time and let me again do the entry for Amazon tenant. Let me create the user. So I'm passing this username, email ID, and password. Okay, and let me hit this save button. So now this user is created successfully, and see, now we have this user, Amazon user, for this uh, user one@amazon.com for the tenant Amazon. Let me create another user. Okay, let me create one more user for Amazon 10 as a user. Okay, and here we go. So I have two users for Amazon tenant. Let me create two more users for Flipkart tenant. And this time I'm passing the name as a Flipkart. Okay, so that I can easily identify like this particular user belongs to Flipkart team. Let me create another user for Flipkart tenant, user 2. Okay. So now for this tenant, Amazon tenant and Flipkart tenant, I have two users. Okay. Now I wanted to verify. I wanted to verify the role that I have created here is the role that I have created assigned is assigned or not. Okay, so for that purpose, what I want to do, simply I wanted to list out the roles as well. Okay, so this particular user has a role from which space. Okay, simply. So quickly, what I'm doing, let me quickly create one more UI flow. I'm calling it as a admin UI flow component just to create the web log. So here I'm creating one web log. I'm calling it as a user role. Okay. What I'm doing here is I'm accepting the input parameter as a user ID, and based on this user, let me pick its role. Okay, so here I'm saying user role table. Inside the user role table, I'm checking out, I'm adding the filter. Just pick all the pick the user of the input parameter where the user ID is matching with the input parameter user ID. Okay, and what I wanted to do, I wanted to perform the join as well. Okay, because I want to display the name as well. So sorry, let me go back to source tab and let me perform the join with the role table so that I can have the proper role name. And one more thing I want to do here is I wanted to join it with the tenant as well, because in the user role we have passed the tenant as well. I want to display that tenant name as well. This user role is created for which tenant? So what I'm saying, I'm just saying tenant, and this user role I'm performing with tenant. Okay, so I'm performing the inner join with the user role and tenant table as well. So now it is going to return me the multiple records. So let me pick list view list, and in this list let me print that. Let me use the expression And in this expression, let me print the role name. Okay, and inside the bracket, let me print the tenant name as well, like whatever tenant, whether we have a current tenant name or not. It means in this user role table, we have provided the correct ID or not. Okay, so just to check that we have created this thing. Okay, now let me wrap this inside a container so that it will come one below another. And let me provide some margin and padding, 4 pixel and 5 pixel. Okay, now let me utilize this one. Let me utilize this one inside the user listing table. Okay, so let me create one more column here and I'm calling it as a row. And let me drag and drop this block here. Obviously it is going to accept the current user ID. So let me pass this current user ID as well. And let me hit this one click publish. So meanwhile it is publishing, let me summarize what we did here is we have created one web block user role just to display all the roles of that user. Okay, along with this in the bracket we have displayed the tenant ID as well, like this role is coming from which tenant. And let me refresh this. Okay, so here we go. So see, displaying user1@amazon.com. The role we have assigned, tenant user role we have assigned, and for which tenant, Amazon tenant. Okay, so we did this thing correctly. So far guys, let me summarize what we did. We have created, since we have two roles in our application, tenant admin and the tenant user. So for the tenant admin roles user, we provided the facility to manage the tenant related information. We provided the facility to create the tenant, as well as we provided the facility to create the users specific to that tenant. Now, the next thing what I wanted to show you is, I wanted to show you to give you, show you if we log in with these users, how we can show the data isolated in the isolated manner specific to that tenant. Okay, so for that purpose, what I'm doing, I'm just picking up any of the user. Okay, and one more thing I wanted to show you. I shown you previously as well. This product and product detail page are only accessible to the tenant user. Okay, so now I created the user one at that amazon.com, which already have this role. So let me log in with this. Okay, and here we go. See, now it is showing me the current tenant ID is 126 and the tenant name is Amazon. It means right now we logged in inside the current tenant Amazon. I did not did anything with respect to the login. Automatically OutSystem has figured it out with the help of username and a password that this user belongs to the Amazon tenant. So it switched tenant automatically and it will start displaying the data for me, whatever data I have with respect to this tenant. Okay, and since the product page was accessible to the tenant user, that's why I'm able to perform the operation on this page. If I go to tenant page, it is going to take me to invalid permission page because I don't have a permission to access the access that data. Okay, now let me show you to create the data. So I'm saying add product. Okay, I'm saying product one for Amazon. Okay, with the quantity 10, price 100, and this product status has active. Okay, now let me add one more product. Product 2, 100,000 quantity and price is going to be at 2000. Product status is active and save. Now I have two records with respect to Amazon tenant, okay, that I have created. Now I'm logging out. And now let me log in with user of Flipkart tenant. Okay, so let me log in with any of the user. Okay. Now pay attention guys here. Previously we have created the record in the Amazon tenant, right? See that records are not visible here. And this is the isolation that is done by the platform with the help of tenant ID. Okay. As I mentioned, OutSystems automatically manage the tenant if you are not displaying. So in the product entity, see, this tenant ID is not visible, but still it is managed by the platform. Okay. So platform has identified the current logged in tenant. Since we logged in inside the Flipkart tenant, it will only retrieve the records of Flipkart tenant. That's why it is not displaying the records that we previously created in the Amazon tenant. Let me create a few records here in the Flipkart tenant as well. So I'm saying product one, sorry, quantity 10, price 8,000, product status is active. Okay, let me add another. 100 is active. Okay. So see, this is how OutSystems manage the tenant specific data. We are able to create unique data specific to the tenant. So whatever data we are creating with the help of Flipkart tenant or whatever data previously we have created with the Amazon tenant, that is isolated. Okay. Flipkart tenant user cannot see the data of Amazon tenant, and Amazon tenant users cannot see the Flipkart tenants data. Okay. This is the isolation that we have provided with the help of tenant entity. Okay. Tenant identifier. Now let me log out. Let me log out and let me bring one more scenario in front of you guys. Okay, so let me log in with my admin user. Now let's suppose I have one more user. I'm calling it as user@multitenant.com. Okay, so what I wanted to do, and one more thing, guys. Here right now I'm inside the user tenant. Okay, because I logged in with the admin user. So I'm inside the user tenant, and in this user tenant, we don't have any of the product related data. So it is not displaying any of the data, not taking any of the data from the Amazon tenant or for the Flipkart tenant. That is isolated. Okay. For the user tenant, I don't have any of the data in my product table, so it is not displaying anything for me. Now I'm going back to the users. And let me create one more user in the Amazon tenant. And this time I'm creating the user with the username user@boattenant.com. Okay, I'm providing the username, email, password. So I ended up creating this user@boattenant, and that is coming on the second page. Okay, let me create another user in the Flipkart tenant, but this time deliberately I'm picking up the same username. And just wanted to show you one more thing. What will happen now? Now the user is created successfully. Now the username, I have the username. I provided the same username and the same password for the user that exists in both the tenant. Now what will happen? So let's check it out quickly. Now let me log in with this user@boattenant.com, password and login. Okay, I have not did anything with respect to the login mechanism as of now. But see, pay attention guys. What is happening now? What OutSystem is doing, OutSystem is checking username and password, and whatever tenant is coming first, it is displaying the data from that tenant. Okay, so since that user and password is matching with the Amazon tenant first, so it is displaying me the data from the Amazon tenant. Okay, But if I would created the Flipkart user first with the same username and password, then if I logged in with that, it will start displaying me the data from the Flipkart email. This is a wrong behavior, guys, right? Because I wanted to log in based on my choice. I wanted to log in. Now let's suppose what I wanted to do while login, I wanted to pick the tenant. I wanted to log in on this particular tenant. So yes, this is also possible, but in this case, you have to customize your login flow. You have to explicitly choose your tenant and you need to provide the username and password. If that exists, then only it will allow you to log in that particular tenant. So if the same user exists in a multiple tenants, then only you can allow the login to a specific tenant as well. But definitely you have to customize your login. Let's see how we can implement this. Okay. Just for the simplicity purpose, what I wanted to do, I wanted to create one more field here. Okay. I wanted to create the drop down here. From there, end user can pick the tenant, and based on that tenant, I wanted to provide the access to that user to that tenant. This is what I wanted to implement. Okay, so let's see how we can implement that quickly. So for this purpose, let me go to the login page. Okay, so we already have this login page here. And in this login page, I wanted to, as I mentioned, I wanted to provide the drop down here to pick the tenant. This is one thing you can implement in this way. Apart from this, there is one more way to implement. Once the user hit the login button, you have to check your user entity. If that username exists more than one time, okay, so you can provide one pop-up. There you can provide the drop down and you can ask to which tenant you want to log in. Okay, that is also you can implement, but more or less that is going to remain same, logic is going to remain same, but additionally you need to add the pop-up. Okay, but for the simplicity purpose, for this demonstration purpose, the same thing I'm doing here. Okay, so I wanted to provide the tenant here, drop down here. Let's see how we can do this thing simply. So what you have to do first, we need to figure it out, or we need to fetch all the tenants. Okay, I'm saying find out all the tenants. Okay, again, I just wanted to find out all the tenant where eSpace ID is equal to effective user eSpace ID. Okay, unnecessary, I don't want to retrieve all the tenants. I just wanted to retrieve the effective user provider eSpace ID. Okay. Now the next thing, what I wanted to do, I wanted to create one more container here. Okay, here I created this container here, and in this container I wanted to create a label, and I wanted to create a drop down. Okay, so I'm saying drop down underscore tenant, input widget. I'm providing drop down tenant, and this one is going to be a, let me create one more local variable tenant uh, and user selected tenant ID that I'm going to save here, and this is nothing but the tenant identifier. Okay, and in this drop down, let me provide the value from the aggregate. Okay, so what it will do, it will display the tenant name, and whenever we will select any of the tenant under the hood, it is going to return us the tenant ID value in this tenant ID parameter. Okay, and let's customize this login flow. Once the end user hit the login button, let's execute this one and do login. Now we cannot utilize this default user login method. Okay, this user login method is coming from the user's eSpace that only look for the username and the password. But we wanted to consider the tenant as well. Okay, so for this purpose, what we have to do, we have to remove this thing. Okay, and instead of that, let's see how we can implement the login flow now. So I'm not going to utilize the user login method. Let's utilize something else. But first thing, what we have to do, we have to figure it out the user. Okay, So let's find out the user detail, whether this particular user exists in the selected tenant or not. Okay, so how we can find it out that very easily. So I'm just selecting this user and I'm saying, let's add one more parameter guys here. Okay, so we are accepting username, password, and accept the tenant ID as well. Okay, because that we already have this tenant ID that is coming from this drop down. Okay, so let's pass that as well, tenant ID. Okay, inside this do login method, I'm retrieving the user from the database. Okay, so I'm saying where the user is active and where user.username equal to whatever username we are passing. If it is directly matching, I'm not converting in lowercase or uppercase. I'm just checking if it will match exactly. Okay, so it will return that thing. If username equal matching with the username, past username, as well as where the user tenant ID will match with the past tenant ID. It means this particular user exists in this tenant. Okay, so I am retrieving that thing. If my aggregate is empty, it means there is some problem. I wanted to return. I don't want to perform any other operation and I wanted to display the message to the end user. User does not exist in the specified tenant. Okay. So let me add few of the parameters as well. I'm saying is error, and let me utilize one more parameter as error message. And let me set is error value as a true. We have an error now, and I'm saying error message. Let me set it as a text. Okay. User does not exist. Simply message I wanted to return. But if I'm able to find out that user with respect to the tenant from the database, and the next thing is what I have to do, I have to check the password as well, whether end users entered password is correct or not. Okay. But this time end user will enter the password in the simple text, and whatever password we have saved in the database, we cannot directly match. Okay, so for this purpose, what we have to do, we have to utilize one more server action just to perform, just to validate the password. Okay, okay. So from the platform password utils, we can utilize one more server action called as validate password. What this validate password will do, it will accept the plain text password, salted hashed password, and it will return you the true or false value. Okay. So this password we have, which is entered by the end user, this password we already have inside the database. So we can match both things. If both the things are matching, then it will return you the is valid property as a true or false. Okay, so let's utilize this one, validate password. So let's utilize this thing and let's pass this password and this salted hash password we have inside the database that we just now retrieved from the database. And now if it is going to return us the true value, if it is going to return us the true value, then only we have to proceed ahead. Otherwise, what we have to do, we have to do the same thing. We have to display the error message. Okay. And here I'm setting the value invalid password. Okay. Now we are done with checking the user with respect to the tenant. We are done with checking the password as well. Now the next thing what we have to do, we have to perform the login. Okay. So we cannot utilize the user login. Okay, so there is one more login function which is provided by the OutSystems. We can utilize that as well. So if you go to the system dependency, the system dependency provide one more server action called as login. So we can also utilize this one as well. Okay, let me hit the apply button and let me utilize this login. Okay, this login. And what this login will do, this login will accept a user ID. So now we already have this user ID. So let me pass this user ID that we already have in our agree. And the persistent, we already have this remember me value as an input parameter. So we can pass that as well. Okay. Now, if everything is perfectly fine, then what it will do, it will allow the end user to enter into the system. Okay. And let's modify some of the code here in the login button as well, based on the input parameter. Okay. So if do login is error false, then only proceed ahead. Otherwise, display the error message and end the operation. Okay, and in between I want to set this is active executing value as a false as well, so it won't display the spinner icon on the button. Okay, so here I want to display the error, and whatever error message we are getting, we are displaying that thing on. Okay, now let me hit this one click publish button. Let me summarize, guys. What we did here is inside the login, first we are retrieving the user based on the username and tenant ID. If that user exists, we are proceeding ahead and we are validating the password. Otherwise, we are returning the error message that user does not exist. And how we are validating the password? To validate the password, we are utilizing this server action, validate password, that accept the simple text as well as the salted password. And it returns true or false value. If the password is matching, then we are proceeding ahead and we are allowing the end user to log in. Otherwise, we are throwing the error message. Now publishing is done. Let me go back to login screen and let me refresh this screen. Okay. So now this time username at the rate both tenant. I provided the password, correct password, and let me hit this Flipkart. Okay. It means I wanted to log in the Flipkart tenant. One more thing we have to do, guys. Let me talk about that. Okay. So see, the error is coming. Now it is saying this. We have to perform the tenant switch as well. Okay, because the default tenant for this application right now is Amazon. So before login, what we have to do, we have to switch our tenant as well before login. Okay, so tenant switch is also one of the function that is coming from the system dependency, so that we have to utilize. Okay, so that is already added. Let's utilize this one before login. Okay. And here we need to pass the tenant. Do you want to switch to which tenant? So I want to switch to the tenant which is selected by the end user. Okay. Now let's verify this one. If user list is empty, then go ahead and display the message. If the password is true, valid, then go ahead and let me refresh. Let me hit one click publish button. Okay. So let me refresh. Let me first show you with the existing user whether we are able to log in with the help of existing user or not now. And this user from the Amazon tenant. Now we are able to log in, and I'm expecting it will display the correct data. So this data is coming from the Amazon tenant. Perfectly fine. Let me log in with one of the users that exists in the Flipkart tenant. So let me pick this. Now I'm selecting Flipkart. Let me hit this login button. This user exists in Flipkart tenant, so it will display the data from the Flipkart tenant. Okay, displaying perfectly fine. Now let's log in with the user that exists in both the tenant. So let me pick this username. Let me provide the user ID, and let me pick Flipkart tenant. So this user exists in Flipkart tenant. Let's log in. Now what it will do, it will display me the data from the Flipkart tenant. Since this user exists in both the tenant. So, but this time, see, this user is able to see the data only from the Flipkart tenant. Similarly, let me log out one more time. And same user, since the same user exists in Flipkart Amazon tenant, let me log in with this as well. And this time it will display the data from the Amazon tenant. See, it is displaying me the data from the Amazon tenant. Okay, and let me log out. Let me show you one more thing. Now this time let me pick the user tenant only. And since this user does not exist in the user tenant, so it is displaying me the message user does not exist. Okay, so in this way you can customize your login flow as well based on the tenant. So right now I created this tenant drop down in the login screen, but maybe you can have the pop-up based on the identification if you have more than one user with the same username. Okay, so that is also a correct implementation. But for the demonstration purpose, for keeping this demo as a simple, I created this drop down here. Okay, so in this way you can manage the multi-tenant things in OutSystems. You are able to create the tenants. We are able to create the users specific to the tenants, and I have shown you how we can customize the login flow as well, so that if the user exists in multiple tenants, so how you can log in. So this is all about, guys, with respect to the multi-tenancy and how we can implement multi-tenancy in OutSystems. The conclusion is multi-tenancy in OutSystems offers a scalable, cost-effective, and customizable solutions for serving multiple customers in a shared environment. Okay, so we have a one environment, one application, and we are able to create the multiple customers, multiple tenants. Okay, so that so that all the customers or the tenants have isolated data. Okay, so this is all about, guys, for multi-tenancy topic. Okay, and I have got some exciting content lined up for you, so I will talk about that in the later sessions. If you have any feedback or if you have any topics as well that you like to see in this channel, drop them in the comment box. And this channel is for you as much as it is for me. Let's continuously learn OutSystems advanced topics. Thank you so much, guys.